West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
When you let your party be hijacked by a depraved, mendacious, lying narcissist who believes that Second Amendment rights are unlimited and is in favor of high-capacity magazines and uses violent vitriol and rhetoric and aims it at Supreme Court justices and other people he considers to be his enemy, you get a shooting out in front of a Supreme Court justice's house. Justice Sotomayor had a security detail, as they are now required to have, mainly because of the environment that we now live in, the society we now live in, because Donald Trump gives license to people to act on their worst instincts. And because he makes and calls the enemy of the people the liberal progressive justices on the United States Supreme Court. I mean, this isn't the Pelican Brief, a movie from the 1980s or 90s. This is real life. Supreme Court justices' lives are in danger, especially on the left. And now we've got a brazen carjacking attempt where a U.S. Marshal, who, thank God, was sitting out in front of Justice Sotomayor's house in where she's located, was able to pull out his service revolver and shoot the attempted carjacker several times, disabling him, but not killing him. That guy, who's an 18-year-old Kendrick Flowers, was brought to the hospital alive and has now been charged with attempted carjacking, and because he also had a high-capacity magazine attached to his handgun, which is also illegal. And so I want to kind of bring all this together because the Republicans on the other side of the aisle like to talk about these things as just anecdotes. They have no real-world consequences. When there's a school shooting and more than 20 children, toddlers, and their teachers trying to protect them are shot and killed, that's a false flag event. That didn't happen. That's like 9/11. That was an inside job. Jan 6th, that was an inside job led by government informants and FBI agents. That couldn't happen on American soil. Donald Trump knows that he has been giving license and permission to those in our society who have ripped up the social contract and are now just unhinged, weaponized, activated as a sleeper cell for Donald Trump and willing to go after FBI agents, Supreme Court justices, and the like. So far, we have avoided blood being spilt. It was just a few years ago that Gabby Giffords, who was running for Senate as a congresswoman, was shot in the head during a campaign event. Federal judges and their families just got attacked in the last 2 years, right? There's a dead husband of a federal judge because he had the misfortune of opening the front door and facing a Trumper who fired his weapon. Same thing happened recently with, whenever Donald Trump sends out a bat signal to his cult followers, bad things happen. He calls law enforcement and the FBI agents, he says and claims falsely, in a defamatory way, in a way to gin up violent responses and to stop the peaceful transfer of power and to deny the new election even before it even happens. And what happens as a result? Well, we know what happens. The Department of Justice Special Counsel's Office just listed it all to Judge Aileen Cannon in Fort Pierce in South Florida. She wanted to know, well, what is the list of things that have happened since Donald Trump opens his mouth at rallies on social media and goes after judges and FBI agents? Because Donald Trump claims that the FBI, working with the Department of Justice, working with Merrick Garland, working with Joe Biden, are operating assassination squad to try to kill Donald Trump and his family. From Barron, was it Little Barron? From Barron to Melania and everybody in between at Mar-a-Lago when they executed the search warrant. He says they weren't trying to execute the search warrant, they were trying to execute me. Because the FBI agents, like the U.S. Marshals in front of Justice Sotomayor's house, are appropriately armed. They're on duty. They also knew that Donald Trump wasn't going to be at Mar-a-Lago in August. Let me explain South Florida, having lived there for 20 years, in August. Unless you have to live there, you don't live there. And Donald Trump always decamps for Bedminster, his other location in New Jersey, his other golf course that he lives in as a grift. He always does that around March or April when things get really heated in Florida. The FBI, it wasn't a random day they picked. They coordinated with Donald Trump's lawyers, with his staff, okay? With the Secret Service detail. They knew that Donald Trump and nobody who had Trump as a last name were there. But that hasn't stopped Donald Trump trying to put a giant a set of gun sights and crosshairs on the back of the FBI. And the FBI just had an occasion, and it was listed in Jack Smith's filing, where they had to shoot and kill a Trumper because they went to execute an arrest warrant related to his threats of assassination against Joe Biden and other people, and he had a weapon, and they had to take him out. That just happened, along with 10 or 12 other examples that when Donald Trump speaks and calls judges, their staff, their family, FBI agents, prosecutors, attorney generals, people of color that are prosecuting him, when he calls them out and says, if you come after me, I'll come after you, bad things happen. Today, it's a carjacking in front of a justice's house that require U.S. Marshal intervention. Tomorrow, it is worse. It's a powder being mailed to somebody's house. It's a bomb being mailed to somebody's house. We have had that we have had assassinations of federal and state judges and prosecutors and FBI agents, and it's only increased that atmosphere because of Donald J. Trump. And yet, he stands atop the only other party in this country. People forget what the GOP stood for. Literally, the grand old party, the party of Lincoln. That's what we're watching? I mean, I'm not a Republican, but that's the other party? At least I had respect for the other party because we could have a coherent conversation about gun rights, reproductive rights, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, diversity rights, voting rights, immigration policy. It's no longer. It takes two to tango. You got to have coherent, legitimate, authentic party on the other side, and we don't. And everybody says, I just heard somebody say in my life recently, well, we didn't have any wars under Trump. As if the reason Putin decided, which he does every 10 years, to try to take new territory over is because Joe Biden is in the White House. Or that's the reason Hamas attacked Israel. Total BS. Total BS. You can't control the timing of third-party events around the world. Sure, we're the world's policemen. Okay, but this isn't Minority Report. We can't stop crime and wars before they happen. And so those same people that blame Biden for the wars won't take responsibility for all of the bad things and bloodshed that's happening in our streets, in school shootings, in church shootings. You can't be safe anywhere right now, right? Because we got a guy, the tone from the top of the Republican Party is, it's okay. Punch that guy. Take that guy out of here. Everybody's, bad people, or there's good people inside of bad people. Proud Boys stand back and stand by. Project 2025, never heard of it. Proud Boys never heard of it. And that party is willing to accept this. Right? And so where does it lead? Inexorably, it leads to shootings and attempted carjackings of United States Supreme Court justices' cars in broad daylight. And I want to put out the warning now that it could likely get worse. Threats of assassination against Judge Engoron in New York went up exponentially and still are, so much so that the Department of Public Safety in New York has its hands full trying to protect the judge, his family, who got called out by name by Donald Trump, his wife, who got called out by name, his principal law clerk, who got called out by name. Just same thing for Judge Merchan, who's about to sentence Donald Trump in September, his daughter. I mean, even on TV and in the movies, organized crime and the mafia had a code. They didn't go after civilians. They didn't go after the wives. They didn't go after the family. They didn't go after the daughters. That crossed the line. Watch The Sopranos. Watch The Godfather. They don't do that. Watch Wise Guys, right? But Donald Trump, anything to get elected. He'll do and say anything, and that is the tone from the top that then seeps into the water supply and ends up with carjackings, attempted attacks on federal judges, crazed Trumpers showing up with hammers in hand to attack and assassinate Nancy Pelosi when they can't find her, hammering her husband's head and almost killing him at the age of 80. And then none of the Republican leadership, is there any? That's almost rhetorical. Is there any Republican leadership? I haven't seen it. They're all kowtowing and cowering in the corner while Daddy Trump comes home on another alcoholic bender threatening to beat the family. That's what we're watching. It's an abusive relationship between Donald Trump and the Republican Party and its so-called leadership. It is. Daddy, don't beat me. That's what we're watching. And if it wasn't so impactful to the rest of our lives, I wouldn't care. If that's the devil's bargain you want to make, the Christian right, the Trumpers, the MAGA, the women in that party, if that's the devil's bargain you want to make because he's doing something else that you like, then just call it out for what it is. But it's an abusive relationship. It's a codependent abusive relationship. If it was a couple, you would send the police over and break it up and send somebody to jail and take somebody else to a home for their protection. And so if we can ever see leadership stop cowering, if people like Nikki Haley, who got, I guess, disinvited from the convention, but she can't find the balls to come out against Donald Trump again because he may win. All the people that at first voted against Donald Trump and tried to censure him and impeach him and call him for what he is, an insurrectionist on Jan 6th, where are they today? Mitch McConnell, where is he? He's in a closet somewhere. He's Weekend at Bernie. They trot him out whenever they need him. But he's not standing up to Trump any longer because there's a chance he could win. And they want to stay in power. That's the oligarchy. They're invested in Donald Trump winning. And they don't care how many innocent victims are trashed or killed along the way. That's the party we're watching. It's easy to gin up anger and fear. It's hard to run a campaign on hope and achievement. which is what we're watching. This battle of black and white, of dark and light. It's all we're watching.
It is Friday, the 12th of July of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is actually up and about, so she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We are. Yeah. You can put that in your hopper, and you can do whatever you want with it after that. So, hey, how are you? It's Friday. And a little update on our Precious. Well, she is, of course, the prognosis, the diagnosis, it's dire. We have to accept that. Her demise could happen very quickly, and it could happen soon. But for now, she is a quite lively little girl, and we're going to let her do that. So she actually got up and got some food, went outside, sat in the rising sun as the sun comes up over the ridge. And now she's come back in, and we'll get her medicine, her prednisone, in her in just a little bit, just so that we stay on the time schedule aspect of it. But for now, as I've said, well, many times already, we're going to love her while we have her. And that's what we'll do. So she actually was up and about, and hell, why not? Let's get her back to work. Put her through her paces. It's only in the virtual way. But it's good to have her back. And she's up and about this morning, and that's what Dr. Dickey said. As long as she wants to get up in the morning and face the day and looks forward to it, well, what more can you ask for of any of us? That's right. Oh, I should mention, since we have this ongoing heat, it's not terribly unusual here in this part of Oregon. We're right in the transition landscape from California to Oregon. So it's like high chaparral in a way. So we get heat. But I don't care where you are. Getting 100-degree plus heat for weeks on end is kind of a drag. So at least I always thought so. The desert was never my favorite landscape. Never. But it's not really the desert, okay? I've got a beautiful cedar tree, got a big old blue spruce. The birches, we're hoping, they survive for a few more years. Might get 3 to 7. I know it's a big range, but we'll see. So, yeah, we have some shade, and that's nice. Now, usually don't get that out in the desert. Oh, no. But we've been getting heat here, so the reason I mention that is that I have the fan running. One of the more quiet ones, I bought a couple of more Lasco tower fans. Get those. They're really good. But the one I had, the one currently, the old one now, that I've had for actually 4 years, and it pretty much ran all the time, even in the winter. So they're good for pushing the cool of your forced air and also the heat. But anyway, I bought a couple of more to put throughout the house, and moving the air inside is key. Now, if you can filter your air, that's even better. So right now, I've got the fan here in the studio running, one of the newer ones, and it's relatively quiet, but this blue microphone, this Yeti, is very sensitive. So I hope it's not too bad for you. I've tried not having it on, and it just gets a little too warm even at this time of day. So, which is early when we should be having the cool. Yeah. Alrighty. What else? Gunner, I should mention, he sometimes gets neglected in all of this. But he's doing quite well himself, knock on wood. So he lost a couple of pounds at his last checkup a couple of days ago. Scheduled him for the eye surgery. When I say eye surgery, it's the lid underneath. It's endemic to bulldogs. It wants to fold into the eye, and the hairs there will scratch the eye and cause him discomfort and worse. So he's scheduled in September to take care of that anomaly. But losing weight is also key, not only to alleviate the profound effects of that folding eye lid thing, underlid, and his general health. So we're on our way. We are on our way. He lost almost 3 pounds in a couple of weeks. And Dr. Dickey said, well, we don't want to have him lose any more than that. That's a good amount of weight to lose in that amount of time. So we're going to keep it up, and we're going to have a svelte English bulldog, Brendel. Okay. What else is there going on in the world? Well, what else is there not? Do you get the feeling the goalposts will always be moved on our, for our side? Everything they make us jump through, every hoop, everything. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. So my suggestion all along is let's not do the dance. They want to get kicked, let's kick them. They want some kicking? Well, let's kick them. We don't have to be the weak-kneed liberal hippies that they can kick. We're punks. We kick back. And now they're upset because they're getting kicked back. Joe gave a master class in foreign policy, diplomacy, political acumen, etc., etc., etc. But all the media wants to talk about, at least MSNBC had to turn them off. Susan Glasser, who was married to Peter Baker, by the way. And I should also mention that means Peter Baker is married to Susan Glasser. See how that works. Anyway, it's just they want to harp on, Joe's verbal tics, his gaffes. Oh my God, he's never had a gaffe before. Jeez. Donald Trump claimed that the woman he raped, when shown a picture of her, he thought it was his wife Marla Maples because he raped her all the time. In the marital bed, of course. So that makes it okay. Of course. Yeah, in the brain of, I don't know, a rapist? That guy couldn't even tell the difference between the woman he raped and the woman he was married to. Which makes you think maybe women all look the same to him. I'm not going to say maybe, maybe. I don't know. So, that's okay, right? People make verbal gaffes all the time. And there's another thing that kind of bugs me. This harping on, he's like so slow and deliberate. Well, yeah, he has a stutter and he's trying to get to the right word. Sometimes he doesn't get to the right word. And people who have dementia do not apologize and correct themselves. Please. Oh, God. My mom had worsening dementia. She had this, I called it aphasia, but that's a layman diagnosis. It has no bearing in medical science. But it's that anomaly. I'm going to use anomaly a bunch of times today, aren't I? Well, it's the behavior or the condition in which you think that you've already experienced something, and medical science has explained that. You know, you think that you've been here before, you've seen this thing before. That you know what I'm talking about. It's like deja vu. My mom was having deja vu all the time. Now, medical science will explain it as that there's a time lapse between when we are able to take in stimuli through the eye, process it through the brain, and then for our body to react to that information as it's finally been decoded by our brain. It's a fraction of a second. And the fastest human, can only get up to that fraction of a second. Everybody else is much slower, of course. So there's deja vu is then explained that you take in the stimuli through the eye, and there's even more of a delay, and then you process it and you process it again, and then do you follow me? I hope so. I guess I'm making it complex, more complex than it should be. Regardless, my mom experienced this all the time. We'd drive down the street, she'd point at a truck and say, that guy does that all the time at this exact same time, every day. I go, in the beginning, I go, Mom, we weren't here yesterday. And she'd get very angry. And the closest that she would ever accept that maybe she might be wrong is that she would argue with me like, oh, well, you just always have to be right. Yikes, poor Mom. So at some point I realized, my mom is really experiencing this, and why should I make it worse for her? Okay? Joe Biden doesn't have that. Joe Biden, when he catches himself in a verbal gaffe, a mistake, a delay in which he's trying to find the correct word and he uses the wrong word because of a stutter, and he catches himself, he apologizes. People who have dementia do not do that. So the other argument now that I'm getting is that, oh yeah, he did great. But we're not talking about now. We're talking about later. And when they're talking about later, they mean when they're not able to get Kamala off the ticket and she's going to be the president of the United States. I think by their silence, they're telling us everything we need to know. And some of them are not even that silent. They're saying, and we got to get rid of her as well. In fact, before, just to be on the safe side. What is that gambit? I don't get it. Do they not know what the existential threat of our times are? Geez, NATO does. I don't know. Joe hosts NATO. Donald Trump hosts Orban. Right after Orban visited with Xi and Putin. What's that all about? I still say something went on between that Saudi jet, the Russian jet, and Trump's jet, all within 20 yards of each other, well within wireless transfer data distance. That happened, and then Orban comes to visit. After physically visiting with Xi and Vlad. What is he bringing? What is he bringing to Donald Trump? Do you think for one moment that all of this outcry all at once about Joe Biden's age is just some organic thing? No. Give me a break. Either there's like some compromise on people who just recently said, I'm riding with Biden, and now they're not. Now, I just got to interject. I pride myself in trying to be objective and seeing things as they are. Granted, I know when it comes to animals, I want to think maybe they're doing better than they are because I don't want to kill them. Okay? Do you understand that part? But I pride myself in being able to determine things as they are rather than things as I want them to be. So yeah, I acknowledge that Joe Biden gaffes. He has ever since he came onto the public stage, the political stage, the arena. He's known for it. And we've also known for a very, 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 very long time. Joe Biden has a stutter. He overcame it. He's mentored young kids and teaching them how to get over their own stutter and not let it impede them and give them confidence to get into life and be something and not let their stutter hold them back. And what do all those kids see? The President of the United States, even he, is getting attacked because of his stutter, as if there's something mentally wrong with him. Unbelievable. Un-effing believable. What ableist BS. Ageist, ableist, and when it gets down to it, in its totality, misogynist and racist as well. Because when people voted for Harrison, who everybody knew is Tippecanoe, you know what comes next. And Tyler too. They didn't vote for one, they voted for both. Why? Because if something happens to the president, the VP takes over. And what happened to Harrison? Well, they say he didn't wear a hat in the cold on Inauguration Day, and he died, 13 days after actually taking office? And who was there? Tyler too. That's how it works. A lot of people said Abraham Lincoln shouldn't have run because he's just going to end up dead anyway. Well, you know what? As a compromise with the South, they put in Andrew Johnson because that's what the vice president's there for. Even on a compromise ticket, that VP is there to take command if for whatever reason the President of the United States becomes incapacitated, like with a bullet in the brain. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. Okay? FDR's last term, he had a vice president by the name of Harry Truman. The buck stops here. I don't remember reading, and I got to tell you, we went through FDR, and I just recently went through the FDR files, the microfiche and newspaper articles of the day. FDR died very recently after he started his fourth term. Nobody said, oh, well, FDR shouldn't run. No, everybody wanted FDR. The only reason we have term limits for presidents is because everybody loved FDR so much they kept voting him in even when he was sicker than a dog. Because he was still doing his job. People say, oh, no one knew that he was, in a wheelchair and had polio. Bullshit. His spa medical facility that he would go to that he basically funded because he was a rich guy. Jesus. He's a Roosevelt, my God. Do you think that was just like some sort of like secret? No. The President of the United States gave it credence, credibility. People looked at FDR pushing through the pain, the debilitating, crippling polio that caused him to be in a wheelchair. Why? Because he could do the job and he kicked ass doing it. Now, of course, on the other hand, we have to accept the fact that America is full of a bunch of idiots. They'd hold it against FDR for, being a cripple, and they did. So it's somewhat of a balance, right? Well, Richard Nixon tried to float the idea that Ed Muskie had some sort of incurable disease like Parkinson's. Come on. Are we really going to fall for this again? Every election cycle, we got to kick the immigrant because that's what you do every election cycle. In fact, now the election cycles go all the time. Let's just kick the immigrant all the time. Ageism, ableism, etc., etc., etc. It doesn't matter. They're going to play the same playbook, and we're going to, play the same playbook? Let's break out of the mold. All right. Oh my gosh, I have gone on and on and on, and maybe I better give you a big rundown or a quick rundown on what we have in store for you, because we might run out of time. Well, yes, that shooting incident out of Sotomayor's home is by her security detail, by the way. Good thing they were there. Well, that's a reminder of Trump's general threats against America and Americans. And I thought that was appropriate that we let the Midas Touch guys, touch on that. On the rest of the menu, a black man in Michigan only got a hotel job interview after using a white-sounding name. Yeah, trying to buy a house. Yikes. A lawyer disbarred in Ohio tricked an Irvine, California law firm into a $250,000 a year job offer. See that? And the Justice Department arrested a New Jersey man for plotting an electrical substation attack to advance his white supremacist views. And he was on his way overseas to fight for Ukraine, too, because he wanted to bring back materiel to help advance his white supremacist cause. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the United States and Germany foiled a Russian plot to assassinate the CEO of an arms manufacturer sending weapons to Ukraine. So when Vlad puts on an arrest warrant on the widow of Alexei Navalny, yeah, it really means it's a hit. She better keep her head down. And the United Nations demanded that Russia immediately return Russia's biggest nuclear plant to Ukraine. And they better do it quick, because who knows what's going to happen next with Vlad. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Follow me on social media at Justice Putnam. You'll have quick access to the show notes and links diaries that I post 10 minutes before showtime, so you can actually read the full actual articles by the actual reporters. And especially on days like this when we'll have to grossly abbreviate those in-depth stories because, well, things happen, don't they? Yes, they do. Speaking of which, my sister, the nurse, flies down to make an assessment on our father today. And if she determines that he's indeed going to have to go on morphine, that means it won't be very long till he passes. So we'll keep you apprised. I still have to be back here in town so that Precious can have her weekly IV drip. And so we'll keep you apprised on social media and other forms of communication if I have to make a quick trip down there and back. Monday and Tuesday might not be a live show as we've been doing. We may have something different and a mix of regular and irregular programming on Netroots Radio. So that stated, we better get into this first offering since we burned up so much time on our morning beginning. Oh my. All right, this first offering here, as I open it up, is out of the Washington Post by Victoria Bissett and Dan Rosenweig Ziff. If I've butchered your names, I apologize profusely. A black man has accused a hotel in Michigan of racial discrimination after he says he was only invited to an interview after he changed the name on his application to one that, quote, sounded more Caucasian, end quote. Dwight Jackson, age 27, applied for jobs at the Shinola Hotel in Detroit. Or is that the Shinola? On multiple occasions, he had applied for jobs between January and April of this year, according to a lawsuit filed last week. For more than 10 positions that included front desk jobs and back-end roles, Jackson sent the applications under his own name. None led to an interview. He then applied for two similar positions as a reservation agent and front desk manager under a more readily apparent Caucasian name, John Jabrowski, and used the same resume and cover letter as before, the lawsuit said. Shinola contacted him for interviews the same week. Shortly after interviewing, he was informed that he was no longer a viable candidate for the position, according to the lawsuit, which accused the hotel of discriminating against Jackson based on his race and then retaliating against him for opposing and complaining about the unlawful hiring practices. Well, in a functioning democracy, this company would pay. We'll see if they do. Brittany May of the Los Angeles Times brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. When he applied for a job at a California law firm last September, he identified himself as Christopher Rich Miller Williams and claimed to be an ex-Marine who attended the University of Michigan Law School, or School of Law. He said he had played football at the University of Michigan, worked as in-house counsel at Bristol Myers Squibb, and was licensed to practice law in New York and Washington, D.C. Impressed, the Irvine firm hired him as an attorney to the tune of $250,000 a year. The only problem, none of it was real, except for maybe the salary. The month after he was hired, federal agents arrested Miller Williams under his real name, Richard Louis Crosby III. This week, Crosby of Mason, Ohio, pleaded guilty in Cincinnati to 3 counts of Social Security number fraud tied to false identities he used to obtain employment with at least 7 law firms, including 3 in California. The Office of the U.S. Attorneys in the South District in Ohio did not provide the names of the hiring law firms. Throughout his scheme, prosecutors say Crosby used identifying information belonging to his elderly father, his girlfriend, a dead man, and others. Well, he was disbarred in Ohio for that, but somehow the vetting process in California is something less than to be desired. Durkin Richer of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A New Jersey man who authorities say was on his way to Ukraine to join a volunteer fighting unit has been arrested in a plot to attack a U.S. electrical substation to advance his white supremacist views, the Justice Department said yesterday, Thursday. Andrew Takhishtov, age 18, was arrested on Wednesday at the Newark Liberty International Airport, where he was headed to Paris before going to Ukraine to join the Russian Volunteer Corps, a pro-Ukrainian group fighting Russian forces. Authorities say Takhishtov began talking in January with a person he did not realize was an undercover agent and began discussing a plan to attack an electrical substation. They drove together to two of them, and one in New Brunswick and another one in New Brunswick, or North New Brunswick, and then New Brunswick, New Jersey, two of those. And he provided information on how to construct Molotov cocktails, the type of clothing to wear, and where to park to avoid detection. He also discussed various strategies for terrorist attacks, including rocket and explosive attacks against synagogues, and expressed a desire to bring back illegal supplies from Ukraine in order to carry out the attacks that would threaten the U.S. government. He also espoused white supremacist views, and in posts with the undercover agent, encouraged violence against black and Jewish communities, among other threats. Well, good. And that brings us to our short break. And when we get back from that short break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs around 100, which was nearly the same as yesterday, but it felt much nicer. Plentiful sunshine, of course, throughout the day. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the low 60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then sunny skies tomorrow with highs around 103 to 105. About the same on Sunday. Thanks so much. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And as I mentioned earlier, it looks like we have a full week of 100-plus weather. Thankfully, though, the nights will be in the low 60s, upper 50s, so that way we can get some cool in the house. Grass pollen is rated high right outside the door here at Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 24 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains high at level 9. Take care, please do. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.01 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 67%. And it will dry out much more than that in just about an hour or two. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 65 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 70 degrees, mostly cloudy, with the ever-present thunderstorm watch this time of year. Rome is 94 and sunny, and they continue with a heat advisory. Kabul is 77 and clear. Hong Kong is 83 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 73 degrees and cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 45 and fair. San Francisco, California is 62 degrees and fair. Chicago, Illinois is 75 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, with a flood watch from Hurricane Beryl. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Natasha Bertrand and Frederick Pleitgen of the CNN website brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. U.S. intelligence discovered earlier this year that the Russian government planned to assassinate the chief executive of a powerful German arms manufacturer that has been producing artillery shells and military vehicles for Ukraine, according to 5 U.S. and Western officials familiar with the episode. You need 3, they got 5. The plot was one of a series of Russian plans to assassinate defense industry executives across Europe who were supporting Ukraine's war effort. The plan to kill Armin Papiger, a white-haired Goliath who has led the German manufacturing charge in support of Kyiv, was the most mature. When the Americans learned of the effort, they informed Germany, whose security services were then able to protect Papiger and foil the plot. A high-level German government official confirmed that Berlin was warned about the plot by the U.S. For more than 6 months, Russia has been carrying out a sabotage campaign across Europe, largely by proxy. It has recruited local amateurs for everything from arson attacks on warehouses linked to arms for Ukraine to petty acts of vandalism, all designed to stymie the flow of weapons from the West to Ukraine and blunt public support for Kyiv. But the intelligence suggesting that Russia was willing to assassinate private citizens underlined to Western officials just how far Moscow was willing to go in a parallel shadow war it is waging across the West. Lest I remind you, Russia has declared war on us. Any collaborators collaborating with Russia? The bell tolls for thee. Edith M. Lederer brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The UN General Assembly adopted a resolution yesterday, Thursday, demanding that Russia urgently withdraw its military and personnel from Europe's largest nuclear power plant and immediately return the facility to Ukraine. The resolution also reiterates the Assembly's demands for Russia to immediately cease its aggression against Ukraine and withdraw all troops, and again reaffirms the 193-member world body's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity. Bug out, Vlad. The resolution was approved by a vote of 99-9, with 60 countries abstaining and 25 countries not voting. Russia was joined by Belarus, Cuba, Eritrea, Mali, Nicaragua, Syria, Burundi, and North Korea in opposing the resolution. China, India, South Africa, and many Middle Eastern countries were among those abstaining. The resolution expresses grave concern over the precarious nuclear safety and security situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It says returning the plant to Ukraine's full control will ensure its safety and security and enable the International Atomic Energy Agency to conduct safe, efficient, and effective safeguards. Fears of a catastrophe have been at the forefront since Russian troops occupied the plant shortly after invading Ukraine in February of 2022. Zaporizhzhia, which has 6 nuclear reactors, sits in Russian-controlled territory in southeastern Ukraine near the front lines and has been continually caught in crossfire. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and of course, with the condition of my father, elderly as he is, we may or may not be here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays or even Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We will be playing it by ear. But Do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here next week at some point, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.